So thank you, Ella. I would really like to start this presentation thanking you and thanking World Habitat for doing this great feasibility study, and say congrats to all the authors. I think this is a very special moment to do this. I think there is a lot of room for progress in Central and Eastern Europe, and I would like to start this presentation reminding of this number we just knew through the 8th overview of housing exclusion Europe 2023, a report made by Fondation Abbé Pierre and Fianza. This 895,000 people homeless in Europe means 30% more than in 2019. I think this is a number that should make us all think about the importance of the challenge we are facing. We are today talking about Central and Eastern Europe, but I think it's important to understand that this is a common issue, and everyone in Europe, we are facing the same issue, and this is the moment. And why do I think this is the moment? Because first of all, we have this Lisbon Declaration from 2021, where all the member states sign up for this very specific challenge to end homelessness by 2030. Also, in that declaration, this European platform on combating homelessness was created. So we could see by then that there is a strong political will on the European context to put homelessness on the agenda and fight it and tackle it and try to end it by 2030. And also, we have to consider one more thing. On the second half of 2024, we will have in the European Union this presidency by Hungary. So we'll see what happens, but it's clear that this is a crucial moment, and it's the right time to to understand how the dynamics in Central and Eastern Europe goes in terms of facing homelessness. So, as Ella Hancock said, I work for the Housing First Europe Hub and wanted to talk a little bit about Housing First and why Housing First, as one of the main housing-led approaches, can be useful for this mind shift, for this paradigm shift that we are talking about. Housing First is not a map, it's a compass. And what do I mean by this? So there are no step-by-step process that you have to follow and it will work. It's not like that. Housing First works more as a compass because we can see 8 core principles, and obviously Housing First means housing on the one side and then support on the other side. But these principles will orientate us in implementing Housing First for people. You can see the principles on the screen. Housing is a human right. I saw there was this question. I think it's already answered. Why separation of housing services from social work is important? Well, the thing is, as I'm saying in this presentation, and it's one of the core principles, housing is a human right. So with this approach, with this right to housing approach, everyone deserves a home, an adequate home as well. But then we have these other principles, choice and control for service users. This is a very, very important principle that guides us when we implement Housing First programs. separation of housing and treatment, recovery orientation, harm reduction, active engagement, and person-centered planning. Oh, sorry. Flexible support for as long as is required. So I think this idea is important when these several countries that are on the feasibility studies and taking into consideration all the recommendations that Nora and Ballard explained just before my presentation. I think it's important to consider all these principles and consider where we are going, but somehow it could be different in every country. Of course, the contexts are different, and we cannot expect to follow the same path that other countries have, because as you can saw in these presentations, obviously these contexts is a little bit different. This is one of the sentences I like the most when I talk about housing first. It is that there's no housing first without housing first. And to me, when I read the feasibility study, I realized, and I could see, and obviously the presentation before also talked about it as well. We have a lack of housing, not only in Central and Eastern Europe, but also in the whole continent. And this is very important. I think there is a key role for national governments to create more housing and to create more social housing. And also, I think this is the time for partnership and networks. I mean, we have a very good example, for example, in Spain, with this partnership between Hogarcí and Provivienda, in terms of being two organizations that join efforts. Provivienda provides housing support, and Hogarcí provides support services for housing first participants, and it's a way to unlock housing as well for these housing first programs. I'm going to share with you in the chat a document we produced in this year about unlocking housing for housing first. You can find there some examples in different countries. And as I said before, you cannot take it, okay, let's just take this project and implement it in my city, because it might not work. But I invite you to go through this document, because you might find some inspiration and understand how the dynamics and how to influence policymakers, and how we can find more housing through innovative ways. Also, I think there are a lot of there is a lot of room for improvement in terms of collaborating with the private rented sector. Might be a good way to start when, and in those contexts where the governments are not very keen to invest on these housing-led approaches. But anyway, I'll let you go through this document, because I'm sure that will be very useful for you. And also, talking about governments, we and when Ella contacted me to talk in this webinar and talk about housing-led approaches in Europe, well, we always think about how Finland started to decrease numbers. I think in the last report by Fianza and Fondation Abbé Pierre, only Finland and Denmark were able to decrease the homelessness and numbers. And how Finland did that? Well, it's a complex explanation, but I think there are two keys for understanding that. One of them is that they actually made housing first as a policy in their national strategy, and also in terms of housing, that I think today is the main concern. In terms of housing, when this new how can I say this? So when the state builds or someone social housing, they have to reserve a small percentage for housing first programs. So this is a way to fund in a permanent way these housing first projects, and you will not have to face this funding issue every year or every few years. So I'm gonna talk about now a little bit about the housing first hub. It will be very brief. I think I have only 3 minutes, so it will be quick. So many of you, I'm sure many of you already know the Housing First Europe Hub. We are a partnership of housing organizations, governments, national platforms, cities, ministries, a bunch of experts working together to promote the scaling up of housing first, an effective systemic response to homelessness across Europe. Actually, scaling up is the main issue now, is the main challenge now, because housing first has been proved that it works through a lot of pilot projects, but it's still not the main homelessness policy across Europe. And one thing is clear. I think we don't need more temporary accommodation. We need to start thinking of eradicating homelessness rather than managing homelessness. I think that's the main lesson we learned from the last years. We provide training. As I mentioned before, we are a partnership network, so we are all the time connecting organizations and people. We do research, and we have communities of practice, frontline workers and housing first managers, housing first for youth, national and regional housing first networks, and we have a pool of hub trainers as well if you need some training. I think this is it for now, but I'm really open and keen to receive some questions and try to answer. Thank you.